All right, you jammy bastard. Let's cut the crap and dive right into this Ulster Scots thing.
Okay, sounds good.
Is it just some dodgy accent from across the pond or a proper lingo?
It's a bit more complicated than that.
More complicated, huh? Well, we've got a stack of info ripped straight from Wikipedia, so we're going to get to the bottom of this.
Sounds like a plan.
It's just us and Wikipedia, no bullshit.
That's how we like it.
So, Ulster Scots, what the hell is it? Lay it on us.
Well, it's what you hear in Northern Ireland.
Northern Ireland.
Yeah, and County Donegal, too.
Okay.
And it sounds kind of Scottish, but not quite.
So, just a Scottish wannabe.
Most people just call it a dialect of Scots, but some people think it's its own language, a full-blown language.
Yeah.
They've even got a whole society dedicated to preserving it.
Hold on. So these lads reckon it's more than just some slang they picked up from watching Braveheart. Wikipedia even says people call it Scotch.
Mm-hmm.
Or the Hamley tongue. What the fuck is Hamley anyway? Sounds like something your nan would say.
Hamley basically means homely or familiar.
Familiar.
Yeah, it's like the language of the hearth and home.
Oh, okay.
It shows how deeply connected these speakers are to their language. It's not just a way of talking, it's a whole way of life for them.
Right, so it's like their linguistic comfort food.
Exactly.
Okay, that makes sense. But what about this Ullins thing? Sounds like something a bunch of hippies made up while smoking a spliff.
It's a mix of Ulster and Lowlands.
Ulster and Lowlands, eh?
Which is what the Scots from the Lowlands of Scotland call themselves.
Ah, right. So how many people actually speak this stuff? Are we talking like a handful of old geezers in tweed caps or what? Well, Wikipedia throws out some numbers like 35,000 in Northern Ireland.
Yeah, and maybe 100,000 total if you count the Republic.
100,000, huh?
Mm.
But who actually knows, really? Seems like a lot of guesswork to me.
The exact numbers are a bit fuzzy.
Yeah.
It's not like they have a box to tick for Ulster Scots speaker on the census.
Right.
But whether it's 30,000 or 100,000, it's a big chunk of the population.
True.
And it's a vital part of their cultural identity.
All right, I get that culture's important and all that, but let's be real.
Sure.
Is this a proper language, or are we just talking about a dialect here?
Yeah.
Even the Northern Ireland government can't seem to make up their minds about it.
Well, the language versus dialect debate is always a tricky one.
Yeah.
Even linguists can't agree on it half the time.
So what is it then?
A language is often defined as a dialect with an army and a navy.
An army and a navy.
Basically, power and politics play a big role in how we classify these things,
Right.
But regardless of the label, what matters is that Ulster Scots is a distinct way of speaking. It has its own unique vocabulary and grammar and pronunciation.
It's not just some watered-down version of English, is it?
Exactly.
Okay, fair enough.
So even if the government can't figure it out, people are still speaking this stuff, and it's part of their heritage.
So what about the Good Friday Agreement? Didn't that give Ulster Scots some kind of official recognition?
It did.
Did they just chuck some cash at them and call it a day?
They did more than that.
More than that?
The Good Friday Agreement recognized Ulster Scots as part of the cultural wealth of the island of Ireland.
Wow.
Which is a pretty big deal.
That is pretty big, yeah.
And they even set up the Ulster Scots Agency to promote the language and culture.
So they're taking it pretty seriously then. I bet there are still some asshats out there who think it's all bollocks.
Oh, for sure. There are always going to be people who dismiss minority languages and cultures.
It's easier to just ignore something than to try to understand it, right?
Exactly.
But the fact that the Good Friday Agreement recognized Ulster Scots shows that it's a legitimate part of Irish culture.
It does.
And deserves respect, whether you like it or not.
Absolutely.
Okay, so we've established that Ulster Scots is a thing, whether it's a language or a dialect.
And they brought their lingo with them. It was part of a plantation scheme.
The plantation scheme.
By the English crown.
Ah, those bloody English.
To try to get control of Ireland, you see.
Oh, I see, yeah.
And they basically swamped the place.
Swamped it?
Outnumbered the English 5-1.
Wow, 5-1.
Yeah.
No wonder their language stuck around.
Exactly.
But did these settlers just sit around drinking Earn Brew and speaking their weird lingo?
They did produce some literature.
They did.
We have records of early Ulster Scots writers.
All right, so what do they write about?
Well, some were pretty standard fare, like poems about weaving.
Poems about weaving? That's exciting.
But then there are more interesting figures, like a newspaper columnist who wrote in Ulster Scots for over a century.
Over a century? That's hardcore.
It really is. That's some serious dedication.
It is. But hold on. Wikipedia mentions that the language almost died out in the 20th century.
It did.
Yeah. What happened?
Well, as English became more dominant in education and the media,
right.
Ulster Scots got pushed to the margins.
So it was like a linguistic underdog.
You could say that.
It became associated with rural life and lower social status.
Yeah.
People started to see it as something to be ashamed of.
Yeah, something they didn't want their kids speaking.
Sounds like a classic case of linguistic snobbery.
It does, doesn't it?
Those posh twats always trying to make everyone sound like them.
It happens everywhere.
But hang on, you said there's been a revival in recent years. What's going on there? Are people suddenly rediscovering their roots?
Exactly.
Wow, that's pretty cool, actually.
There's a growing movement to revitalize Ulster Scots. It's partly about preserving cultural heritage, but it's also about reclaiming a sense of identity. Right. People are realizing that their language is something to be proud of, not something to hide away.
I like that. I like that.
Yeah, it's really interesting to see.
But here's where I get pissed off. Wikipedia talks about how some folks are trying to reinvent the written form of Ulster Scots, making it all fancy and complicated. Yeah. It's like they're taking the piss. It's all bollocks, and no one can understand it.
Well, there's definitely some debate about how to write the language.
Oh, I bet there is.
Some people want to stick to traditional spellings, while others want to create a more standardized system that's easier to learn.
Right, right.
It's a tricky balance.
It is.
Between preserving authenticity and making the language accessible to a wider audience.
Yeah, I get that.
It's a tough one.
It is. It is.
But yeah, there are definitely some strong opinions out there.
Yeah, some of those spellings are just ridiculous. It's like they're trying to make it look like Gaelic or something.
It's definitely a bit of that going on.
Like they're trying to out-weird the Irish.
Some people see the revival of Ulster Scots as a way to assert a distinct cultural identity.
Right, so they're trying to be different.
Yeah, and that can sometimes lead to some, shall we say, creative spellings.
Creative is one word for it. I'd say it's more like linguistic anarchy.
Uh-huh. Maybe a bit of both.
Yeah, probably.
But ultimately, it's all part of trying to revitalize a language that's been marginalized for so long.
Yeah.
It's like a teenager trying to find their own style, you know?
Right.
They might go through a phase of wearing ridiculous clothes and listening to terrible music.
Yeah. We've all been there.
But eventually they'll figure it out.
Hopefully they'll figure it out.
Exactly.
So we've covered a lot of ground here. We've talked about the history, the politics, the culture of Ulster Scots.
Yeah.
But let's get down to brass tacks.
Yeah.
What does this stuff actually sound like? Hit us with some of the good stuff.
All right. You ready for this?
Hit me with it.
Buckle up, because things are about to get a little trippy.
Oh boy, here we go.
Remember those creative spellings we talked about?
Oh God, you're making me nervous.
Get ready for a whole new level of linguistic weirdness.
Hey.
Imagine someone decides to translate Alice's Adventures in Wonderland into Ulster Scots.
Oh no.
Sounds harmless enough, right?
Yeah, I guess so.
Wait till you see what they do to the language.
I'm already getting flashbacks to those messed up spellings on Wikipedia.
It's even better than that.
Better.
They take phrases like, "Who are you?"
Yeah.
And turn it into "What a?"
What air, yay?
And "I hardly know, sir," becomes "a hardly know, sir."
Jeez Christ, that's brutal.
It's like they're trying to phonetically capture a thick Scottish accent on paper.
Who in their right mind thought this was a good idea?
The translator, Anne Morrison Smith.
Anne Morrison Smith.
She wanted to make the book accessible to a wider audience.
Right.
By using a more phonetic spelling system.
Okay.
But let's just say the results are divisive.
Divisive. That's putting it mildly.
I bet even native Ulster Scots speakers are scratching their heads wondering what the fuck is going on.
Like, is this supposed to be a joke?
You're probably not wrong.
It sounds like one.
But hey, at least it's entertaining, right?
Yeah, I'll give you that.
It's like a linguistic train wreck. You can't look away even though you know it's going to be bad.
All right, let's move on before I have a full-blown aneurysm.
Okay, fair enough.
What else have these linguistic rebels been up to?
How about this? There's an annual report from the Northern Ireland Department of Agriculture and Rural Development that's been translated into Ulster Scots.
Government reports are about as exciting as watching paint dry. What's so special about this one?
This report goes beyond just translating the words.
Okay.
They've created this whole new orthography.
Orthography?
That's a fancy way of saying spelling system.
Right.
That's a bizarre mix of traditional Scots, archaic words, and completely made-up spellings.
Oh, God. Here we go again.
Brace yourself.
Okay.
The phrase, handling procedures to eradicate animal diseases, becomes Henlands Forte Red Outcome Diseases.
That's fucking brilliant.
It's like they took a bunch of Scrabble tiles, threw them in the air, and whatever landed face up became a word.
I mean, it's completely bonkers, but but you have to admire the sheer audacity of it all.
Exactly.
It's like they're saying fuck you to the rules of language.
They're pushing the boundaries of what's considered acceptable.
Yeah.
And whether you love it or hate it,
Right.
you can't deny that it's making people think about language in a new way.
Yeah, I guess you're right. It's like a linguistic experiment gone wrong.
Sometimes the best discoveries come from accidents, right? It's about embracing the unexpected and challenging the status quo.
Right.
And who knows, maybe some of these crazy spellings will actually catch on and become part of the language.
I wouldn't bet on it, mate, but hey, anything is possible.
Anything is possible.
So what's the takeaway here? Is this modern-day Ulster Scots a glorious revival of a dying language?
It's a bit of both, to be honest.
A bit of both.
It's a passionate attempt to preserve a cultural heritage, but it's also a bit of a free-for-all with everyone trying to come up with their own version of the language.
So it's like a linguistic Wild West.
Exactly.
Anything goes, huh?
It's a chaotic and exciting time to be an Ulster Scots speaker or enthusiast.
I bet it is.
There's a real sense of experimentation and innovation. And who knows what the future holds for this fascinating and often baffling language.
Who knows?
Maybe it'll become the next big thing.
Or maybe it'll just fade away.
Yeah, maybe.
Well, that's a cheery thought.
We've delved into the history,
We
the
have.
politics, and the current state of this Ulster Scots thing.
Yeah, we've seen how it's been shaped by migration, power dynamics,
Yeah.
and even a bit of good old-fashioned rebellion.
It's a fascinating story.
It is.
But for our listeners out there who aren't linguists or history buffs, what's the bottom line?
Well,
Why should they give a damn about Ulster Scots?
why should they? All right, so we've had a right laugh at those mangled spellings.
We have.
But I guess there's more to it than just taking the piss, right?
Yeah.
What's the bigger picture here?
It's about recognizing that language is more than just words.
More than just words.
It's about identity, belonging, expressing a culture that's been marginalized for centuries.
Right, right.
Imagine being told that how you speak is wrong, inferior, just a dialect.
Ouch, yeah.
Ulster Scots is like a big fuck you to that kind of thinking.
So it's sticking it to the man, linguistically speaking.
Exactly.
But let's be real, most people listening to this,
Yeah.
they're not suddenly going to start speaking Ulster Scots
Probably not, no.
down at the pub.
Yeah.
What's the takeaway for them?
Even if you never learn a word of Ulster Scots,
Right.
understanding its struggle is a reminder that diversity matters.
Diversity matters.
Languages aren't just tools.
Right.
They're living records of history, culture, different ways of seeing the world.
All right, I'm getting all warm and fuzzy inside now. But let's wrap this up.
Okay.
Any final thoughts for our listeners before we send them back to the real world?
Next time you hear someone speaking differently,
Okay.
don't just dismiss it as bad English or some backwater dialect.
Right.
Try to listen to understand,
actually
to appreciate the richness and diversity that language brings to our lives.
Damn, expert speaker.
Mm.
That's some profound shit.
It's all about perspective.
I need a pint after that, but you've got a point.
Cheers to that.
So there you have it, folks. Our deep dive into Ulster Scots.
It's been a journey.
It has. It has.
From mangled spellings to profound insights.
It's a language, a culture, a bit of a head fuck,
It is, yeah.
but definitely worth knowing about.
For sure.
We've explored its history, laughed at its quirks,
And hopefully we've given our listeners something to think about.
and hopefully we've left you with a new appreciation for the underdog.
The underdogs.
Until next time, keep your ears open, your minds curious, and don't be afraid to say fuck you to the linguistic snobs out there. Cheers.